So from a parent standpoint, first and foremost, understand what your kid wants from it.
Love it.
Because if I want them to be D1 athletes and whatever, and that's not what they want, we're going to butt heads constantly. And I'm going to be constantly, and I don't want to say disappointed, but frustrated maybe with, well, why aren't you doing this? Well, why aren't you going and taking extra swings? And why aren't you doing these things? And like, I'm just out here to have fun.
Welcome to the Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. My name is Travis Rogers. I'm a mental performance coach and the father of 2 athletic boys. Through this podcast, I hope to deliver actionable strategies that you can implement to help your son or daughter optimize their personal and athletic growth. I also hope these conversations help you enjoy the ride. Today's guest is Jay Guerin. Jay provides an amazing perspective on raising athletic kids. Jay's 2 oldest sons play Division I college baseball, and his 2 younger sons are 8 and 10 years old. Jay has been through the ups and downs of raising 2 athletic kids, and now starts again. Here we go. Welcome to the Parenting Athletic Kids podcast. A special guest today. You're going to find out why if you stay tuned here. This guy has been in sports and raising kids a long time. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Jay Guerin. Tell us about your kids.
Thanks, Trav. Well, I've got 4 boys. So I've got a 20-year-old who's now a junior in college. I've got an 18-year-old Tyler who's a freshman in college. And then I've got a 10-year-old George and an 8-year-old Russell. Excuse me. So I've literally got the 20-year-old and the 10-year-old and the 18-year-old and the 8-year-old. So I have 10 years removed from the older 2 to the younger 2.
Tell us about Blake and Tyler, the oldest, the 20-year-old and the 18-year-old, what they're up to, where they're at.
Sure. So they are both at the University of Iowa playing baseball. And so Blake is entering his junior year there. And, his first year there had some spot playing time. They had a grad transfer as their first baseman. Blake's a first baseman. And that's about all he is. He's first baseman or DH. He's probably not going to move around the field too much. But so he had some spot playing time, had, 40, 45 at bats or so his freshman year. And then sophomore year started off as a starter for them at first base. And then through the year, lost a little bit of playing time here and there, and then was getting more spot starts towards the end of the year. But Tyler is just starting his freshman campaign there. So Tyler is brought in as a 2-way over there. So he's going to pitch his other position as first base, maybe some outfield, but I don't think they're looking at him much for outfield. I don't think they like the idea of having one of their pitchers heaving a bunch of throws from the outfield. So I think they like first base where he's not going to be throwing a lot.
Right. So the great thing about it, and really why I wanted to have Jay on the podcast, you can figure it out right away. Like he just mentioned, we were talking beforehand, he's got 2.0. He's got a second chance at this. Not that he did a poor job the first time around. I was lucky enough to know both Blake and Tyler and coach both Blake and Tyler. So great kids, have done it right, not just on the field, but off the field, leaders, everything you can want character-wise off the field as well. So let's walk through, before we dive into this separation thing between the kids, your first go-around, what did you emphasize? Let's start with that. What was important to you in this sports, its venture of sports?
I think my most important thing going the first time through was I think of sports as a conduit, if you will, to teaching character. So my boys had goals, and we would have some short-term goals, whether it was for the season or a couple, 1 or 2 years, or long-term goals. They both had goals, and I wanted to help push them and drive them with those goals. But I honestly, for me, sports are going to come and go. Not everyone's going to be able to make those lofty goals of whether it's playing collegiate sports or professional sports, but you can really utilize that time to teach character, whether it's teamwork, whether it's dealing with adversity, working with other people, Sometimes just being a good soldier, like this isn't the way that I would do it, but this is the way you're going to do it because this is what this coach says. So that's where my philosophy has always been on sports. When I was a coach, but also parenting these guys, it was always about what can the sport teach you and how can we then relate it to life in general.
Awesome. Where did that come from for you? Like everybody, I know you coached. How did you come to that place? Why is that so important for you?
I think, one of the things that we always told the boys and continue to, all four boys, but your sport does not define you because you're going to have setbacks or at some point it is going to end. And I never want them to be defined by their sport. Being a coach, so I had coached various varsity sports, whether it was football, volleyball, softball, baseball, hockey. I've coached at the varsity level and I've coached at the youth level on all of those. And I see these kids and these athletes that they are defined by their sport, and not because their parents necessarily did that to them, but that's what they kind of define themselves as. And I just always had the belief, and I was a pretty good athlete growing up, but I was never, sure, I had some colleges talking to me about things, but I'm assuming I just heard it over and over from my parents that this is all about teaching you how to be a good person and how to work in society and be a good employee and again, just the character side. So I don't necessarily remember like specific conversations that my mom or dad may have had with me about that.
Right.
But I think that's probably where it came from. And then probably also some of the coaching development stuff that I did where you're constantly talking to other coaches and learning from other coaches and experts in the field of coaching. And the whole idea that this is a short term in the span of your lifetime. This is probably a short term thing as you being an athlete in this particular sport, and what can you take from it otherwise?
Love it. How would you, if you saw a parent or an athlete that was in that place where their sport defined them,
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of things would you say? Let's say to the parent, how would you say anything? Maybe you just went through what you would kind of say. What kinds of things would you pinpointedly say to them to maybe sway them a little bit towards focusing on some different things?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that I learned early on, at least that was successful for me. Now, I'm a big dude with a deep voice, and so maybe parents don't always say the same things to me that they do to other coaches. But I never got a lot of parent pushback, and I got a lot of really good feedback from parents because at the very first meeting of the year, I would lay out what my philosophy on sports was, and that yes, sure, I enjoy competing and I enjoy winning, but it's really about character development. And by being on one of my teams, these kids are going to learn how to be good people, and they're going to be forced to be respectful and all the things that you would expect out of a good athlete and a good team. The winning kind of takes care of itself. The wins and losses are a byproduct of it. And so when I would encounter kids or parents that were like that, first and foremost, one of the things that I always did is whenever we would have a day and we're talking about, well, why do I make you start when I say everyone on the foul line, we're gonna go for a jog or whatever we're gonna do. Why do I make sure that every single one of you has your toe behind the line, not on the line, not half a foot over? Why? And so I would talk to them about the specifics and then I would ask them to relate that to real life. Like, where in real life is that going to be a lesson for you? And so I'd have a lot of those conversations with the kids, and I would always try to help them apply these things to real life outside of the sport, just so they saw maybe the connection. Because as a kid, I don't know that I ever made the connection of why I was being taught a certain way and why the discipline and those things were being emphasized and how that would relate to me later in life.
Right. That's incredible. And I think that's almost the new age in coaching, right? We didn't have those kind of coaches. We just did whatever
Right.
we were told. I think it's whatever has changed in society. Kids question stuff more. Kids want to know the why they're doing stuff. So if you can explain here's why. Like, it seems to go a long way. And we probably should have had that being done to us as well. We just kind of did what we were told and figured it out a long ways down the road later.
Right.
Probably. Really cool. One thing, parents out there, I think as Jay's talking, it dawned on me, like these character traits, like if you're really involved or your kid is really involved in their sport, they want to be really good. That's great. But these character traits, these things that Jay's talking about, where we need to be behind the line, we need to finish every rep, we need to be respectful to people, they're not just personal woo-hoo character traits. That's what's going to make them the best athlete they can be as well. So that's one thing that I want parents to know. It's not, it's both. It's covering both. So when you focus on being a hard worker, when you focus on overcoming adversity, when you focus on all these things that are great on the field and off the field, it's a win-win. You can't lose, right? Any thoughts on that?
Well, and it's I think that whole thing is just confirmed with my experience with whether it's youth coaches, other youth coaches, high school coaches, club programs, college scouts, pro scouts, college coaches. It's confirmed by that's everything that they're talking about. Like, sure, I can watch a kid go 4 for 4 at the plate with a couple bombs, or go 0 for 4 at the plate, but I'm watching how they run out to the field. I'm watching how they take warm-ups, how they are with their teammates, how do they act when they're 0 for 4. And so all these other coaches are doing that. Well, it's the same exact lesson then, and that's where you can take that opportunity. The kid goes 0 for 4, has a terrible day, but they had a great attitude. They were the biggest cheerleader for their team. They were positive the whole time. And there again is where I would just always reinforce that this is going to serve you well later in life. Dealing with failure, but then staying positive, and how you approach that failure today is going to help you. You may not see it today, and it may not be fun today, but this is going to help you later in life. Yeah. And so I've been reinforced by all the coaches and scouts and everyone that I've encountered, but I've just seen so many fruits from it, I guess, from my perspective of whether parenting it or coaching it.
Right. Love it. What challenges did you face in that realm with Blake and Tyler, or one more than the other? Like, I know it's not always easy.
Yeah.
So what challenges did you face? Did you face challenges? How did you overcome that?
Well, I can sit here and I can say these things and sound like, oh man, this guy's got his stuff together, right? Oh, he would have been a pretty darn good coach. What? you saw some of the lowlights probably, right? Where you get over competitive and you get, one of the things that I did, and I would tell Blake or Tyler after practice, I'm like, hey, I'm really hard on you, because I have high expectations, and you have high expectations of yourself, but I also say things to you that I want the other kids to hear. Like, I can talk to you a different way. For some reason in my head, I felt like I could talk to them a different way than everyone else, but and I assumed everyone else was going to absorb that information, like, oh, that applies to me too. That was one thing that I think was, when I look back and when I go through version 2.0, I don't do that ever. Like, I really don't do that. But from the character standpoint, and I was always really tough on my own kids, but my teams just in general, I was really strict on discipline and how you were going to play the game and how you were going to act. And while I don't see all these other kids that I've coached, every day, I do encounter them. I do see them. Our high school baseball program, which most of those kids went through, has a very good reputation. And I take a lot of pride in that, in how they were raised. You were a part of that too, but in how they were raised and how they were coached from doing things the right way. And then my older boy specifically, I take a ton of pride in people go out of their way to tell me what good kids they are, and not how well they can hit a ball and how fast they can throw a ball, but the way that they've mentored these other people's kids, the way that they've accepted them into a program, the way that they've taken time out to really spend time to help them develop things, and just who they are as people, that is the first thing that I brag about. That's the first thing that I brag about. The stats and everything else and the accolades are amazing, and it's really fun to be a part of, but I brag about the character, and that's what I'm most proud about.
Love it. So let's go into 2.0 a little bit. So starting now, 10 and 8, any things that you learned through your 1.0 version, like you're going to try to do better?
So many things, Trav.
Or
Well,
okay.
what's interesting is, so the 10-year-old George is very driven. He's a student of the game, whatever game he's playing. He's a student of it and wants to learn more about it, has a high baseball IQ, high hockey IQ. And I see he's very similar to what Blake was, my oldest. And then Russell, the 8-year-old, is very similar to what Tyler was, where he's a pretty darn good athlete, but he's just out there having fun, and he doesn't really care to know how to do these certain things and all the technique and things like that. And so I literally am getting a second shot at this with George and Russell.
Yeah.
And I've learned that, the wins and losses do not matter. And it absolutely doesn't matter. The results absolutely don't matter. My biggest mantra now, other than trying to teach the character side of it, is process over outcome. And I don't know if that was directly from you or just a part of what I've taken on over the years. I know you've been huge on process over outcome, but that every single player, and my 2 boys hear that over and over again. We may win a game in hockey 5-0, and it was an awful game by us. Like, our process was really terrible. And we may get whooped 10-2, but it was the best game we played all year. And I am jumping for joy. I think parents that are going through this for a first time that have me as a coach now probably think I'm a little bit maybe not competitive enough. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm competitive, but I'm competitive in I want the kids to do the things the right way and how we've coached it and how we've practiced it. I do not care about the wins and losses. I was far more concerned about wins and losses the first time around. I was really happy with that 9-year-old town championship, Shoreview Youth Baseball Championship, which meant nothing, right? It's all about process over outcome for me. That's a major shift in my thinking.
Yeah, love it. I mean, I'm the same. If I could go back and, yeah, state tournaments at 12U and all these things, I think luckily enough, and I think that you do this and did this as well, it was still process over outcome. It was still character right through it all, but probably afterwards a little too high or a little too low, depending on the wins and losses.
Yep.
And knowing you, like, I don't think you shared that. Was more of an internal dialogue. At least it was with me. Like, I wish we would have won that, or I wish we would, whatever. But I don't think, knowing you and when you coached, and I'm sure doing it again, like, it's still on the field, is still, you're not showing that,
Right.
Showing that too much. How about when you stepped away with Blake and Tyler from coaching them? Anything different parent-wise? And you're still, I'm sure, coaching the 2 youngers.
Yeah.
But you've kind of talked about, like, what you did and what you thought was important and valued coaching, but you didn't coach them in high school. You didn't coach them, I don't think, through club baseball. I'm sure there was some coaching going down to the park and hitting and stuff like that. But what about just the parents out there? Like, how do you think they can emphasize the right things or de-emphasize the wrong things just as a parent?
Yeah. Well, I think the goal setting is big, and Blake and Tyler, yes, they would do goals. I know they did journaling a lot, and that was through a lot of your coaching where they picked up the journaling side of it. But whether it's game goals, season goals, 2-year goals, 5-year goals, they always had those in mind. We talked about those a lot. Like, what do you want out of this thing? So from a parent standpoint, first and foremost, understand what your kid wants from it.
Love it.
Because if I want them to be D1 athletes and whatever, and that's not what they want, we're going to butt heads constantly. And I'm going to be constantly, and I don't want to say disappointed, but frustrated maybe with, well, why aren't you doing this? Well, why aren't you going and taking extra swings? And why aren't you doing these things? And like, I'm just out here to have fun. Like, I don't see myself as a college player.
Right.
So I think getting on the same page with them, knowing what their goals are and what they want it to be, and not trying to make my goals their goals. Just because I want something for them, I shouldn't be making that for them.
Love it.
The second thing, though, is once I know what their goals are, I'm going to do everything in my power to help them achieve those goals. Not for them, but I'm going to try to provide them with the opportunities. And that doesn't necessarily mean paying for club ball. Like, that doesn't need to mean that. It can just mean I'll take the time out, even after a long day of work and being tired. I'll go up and I'll throw you soft toss. I'll go and throw you pitches. And once they hit that 15, 16-year-old level, they were getting such high-level coaching, whether it was from club or high school ball. Like, I was out. Like I can tell you to get your foot down early and to load early, but I can't pick on the little things inside a kind of an elite swing. But I'll give you reps. That I can do. I can give you reps. I'll go throw the ball. I can be a catcher. So identify their goals and then do everything in my power to help them get to those goals.
That's amazing.
From a team or coaching standpoint, I think one of the big things that I've had to help my kids understand, and Tyler's going through this right now at University of Iowa. They do a lot of things differently than he's ever done. It doesn't make it wrong because a coach has a different philosophy on how they're going to do something. And if that's how this coach wants it done, then that's how you're going to do it. And so helping them to understand that. And sure, if you want to ask the why, you know this, Blake was a big ask the why kid, right? And but he would usually fall in line with it. And Tyler doesn't always ask the why. So he sits there and wonders, and he doesn't get it, and so he has a hard time buying into it.
Right.
But just trying to coach them up on that, on saying, hey, there's 15 different philosophies on how to field a ground ball. There's
Right.
15 different philosophies on covering first, holding the runner. Like, whatever the current one is doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just what it is at that day.
Right. Those are fantastic. What I want to ask you next. So we had a conversation a while ago. I want to kind of dive into this a little bit about Blake and my older son, Will, and how their coaching was so process oriented. And now they're both Division I college players. And oftentimes at the college level, that's not so as much. It's the college coaches have to win games. So they're putting guys out there, they're saying things, and they have to win games. We talked about, if you remember, like it's hard, I think, for our kids to focus on winning or focus on outcome. How did we navigate that in our conversation? Do you remember the conversation? Like, yep. I think it's hard for Will and Blake to go into those situations because they've never had to do that. They've never had to just hear, you're not good at this, or you're terrible at that, or get better at this. It's always been, we want you to get better at this. Here's how we can do it. So how have you helped? I hope that makes sense. How have you helped Blake to navigate that piece of it? And Tyler will probably run into the same thing.
Sure.
How have you helped him to navigate that?
It's a lot of listening. So, all right, tell me what's frustrating right now. Tell me what the experience is, because I do also have to understand I'm hearing it from one perspective, which is his. And so I try to help him understand their perspective. Like, Division I athletics program, it is a winning mentality, and it's a win now mentality. And so if someone isn't performing, so the outcome isn't there, the results aren't there, it's next man up or next woman up. And you're going to have to figure yourself out on your own until you get another shot. So there's that side of it, and understanding that it's not, there's no plain favorites. It's just, we're going to give everyone an opportunity. And if the next person doesn't succeed, then you're going to get another shot. So there's that piece of it is helping them understand that perspective. The second thing is, okay, how can you stick to what you know? How can you stick to being process driven, not results driven, even with a results driven team and mentality that's going on? And so, technology these days, it's kind of a catch-22, because these kids go up there and they may have a 100% swing decision, but there's a human factor in the swing decision, right? Which is an umpire standing behind the plate. And while you have a 100% swing decision, you went 0 for 3 with 2 Ks and a ground out because you got called out on bad pitches or pitches out of the zone. So do I feel good because my metrics say that I was 100% swing decision, or do I feel bad because the coach is shaking his head at me when I'm walking back to the bench?
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to feel good and feel bad about? And that's where you have to just be confident in what you are and who you are as a player. I feel really good about it. Yep, coach is disappointed because we didn't perform, but I feel good about where I'm at. So just trying to stay positive in that thing. And Blake's really good at staying positive for everyone else. And he'll be the biggest cheerleader out there. And he will root everyone on. And the guy that goes and pinch hits for him and he gets pulled from the game, he's going to be his biggest fan and help him figure out how to play first base better. But staying here for himself is where he struggles. And that's where he started off last year and was slumping, and all of a sudden started to lose some of that playing time, like I said. Super positive for everyone else, but not for himself. And so that's what I've done a little bit of, just trying to parent him with, how can you stay positive with you? How can you stick to your process, even though we're more outcome driven with playing time and things like that.
That's awesome. Why do you think Blake lacks confidence or has a hard time sticking with the confident mindset and can do it for other people? Do you have any idea, like going back in time, things you could have done better? What are your thoughts?
I think this is my own assumptions. One is I go to love languages. That's something that I'm fairly aware of with people and identifying their love languages. And I really think one of Blake's love languages is words of affirmation. And when you're not getting that, then you're not feeling the love. You feel like they don't like you. Just because they bang on you a little bit, or they yell at you, or shake their head, whatever it may be, doesn't mean they don't like you as an athlete. They don't like what you're doing. It's the result wasn't what they wanted.
Right.
And so I think there's one piece to it is love language. I think the other thing to it is he does have such an extremely high baseball IQ that he starts to just overthink everything.
Right.
And he gets in his head on, okay, well, they don't like me swinging at sliders, so I'm sitting fastball. Well, then I take 2 sliders for strikes, and I look in the dugout and I see someone shaking their head. Like, like, stick to your process. If that's your process, that's your process. Now, what's your 2-strike process? Even though it got you here, like he I don't want to say overthinks, but he's processing all the different things that are happening around him instead of just sticking to his thing and what he needs to be doing.
Okay. Is there anything, this is a really hard question, during youth, like you think you could have helped him to change that? Or is it just, time has shown that to be the case and now he's got to deal with it? Any thoughts on that?
I've thought about different things that we've gone through and different things that have happened. And one thing that you get is all these kids at the collegiate level, they were the top of the top, right? And they had a lot of success. And so they didn't have to worry about the outcome because the outcome was typically pretty good over a law of large numbers over a long time span, whether it's a week or a month or a season. And I go back to his junior season of high school, when had a great sophomore campaign in the summer and fall and things like that. But then junior season, and all of a sudden he's struggling at the plate. And you were on that staff, and you saw him just in his own head, and you're sitting there and you're like, well, I know this kid can have success here. And so I think about, like, that was the first time that I had to, I think, really try to parent that side of it in, hey, this is just a part of it, and you got to work through it, and think of all the things that you're learning right now. And no athlete wants to hear that. Like, hey, it's okay going 0 for 16. Think of how you're learning to fight adversity right now and stay positive, right? They're like, all I want is a bloop single, Dad. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But that was, I think we didn't have a ton of that until probably his junior year of high school, when he struggled the first part of that season.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, it's hard when things have been really good, and most of the higher end athletes just have good stretches, maybe until they get to college or the minor leagues or whatever it might be. And then there is definitely a learning curve at that point, because you can't, unless you've struggled, you don't know how to deal with struggle. Unless you don't know how to deal with failure, adversity, whatever you want to call it. So awesome. Supporting him, having conversations, focusing on the process, all great things. I wanted to ask you, when your kids decided, we talk about writing goals, when they decided they wanted, I'm assuming at some point they're like, I want to play college baseball, play professional baseball. What changed in either how you were coaching them or how you were parenting them once they said that?
Once they said it, then I was very clear on what I thought it would take from them to be a collegiate athlete. The commitment, the energy that you would need, like everything in between. Like, I was very clear on those things. And then it was a reminder, like, they were both very clear they wanted to play Division I baseball. And then when the recruiting aspect of it is different, because then there's different thoughts in there and different goals. But when they said they wanted to play Division I baseball because they wanted this to be their career, so Division I baseball first and then professional baseball, then I said, then here's what I think you're going to have to do. And then I would also be very aware, or help to make them very aware of the decisions they were making, and is this going to get you there? So, not wake up one day and you're like, oh, you're not lifting today, is that going to get you Division I? Not like that, but more so, let's talk about what strength and conditioning looks like. Let's talk about what flexibility, let's talk about what diet looks like. So long-term vision of those things, not banging someone for eating a Big Mac or not, right? But more so just, okay, what's the long-term vision of that? And then let's just fairly regularly revisit, what decisions are you making and what do you need to do to get there?
Can you break that down to even another level for me? So you're saying, once they said that, like, okay, here's the long term, you have to, lift weights, not have to, like, here's what I think is the formula for that.
Mm-hmm.
On a day-to-day basis, in parenting them or coaching them, did you change things at all? Was there, I don't know, more of an emphasis on outcome then at that point? Was there more reminders constantly of, hey, you said you wanted to do this, 6 a.m., it's time to go to the gym? Like, what, does that make sense?
Yep.
On the day-to-day, what things changed, if any?
On the day-to-day, it still wasn't well, I will say there was a lot more outcome, but more outcome on metrics they could control, if you will, like QABs, right? Quality at bats, barrels. You could barrel up 8 balls in a row and get out 8 times in a row. So like, are you performing in the way that's making you up that upper echelon of a collegiate style player? So that was more outcome driven, which that was hard because it's not always in your control. And you're going to have bad days when you don't have quality at bats, you don't barrel them up. You don't want to look at the micro and look at one day, but more so, let's look at how you're doing over the last several weeks or several games. So there was more outcome driven there. I think as a parent, one of the really frustrating things and difficult things is if I know getting in the weight room is a good thing for you. And to a T, these kids that come back from college to hang out in the weight room with our hockey or baseball or football teams, whatever, the number one thing they all would say is, I wish I got in the weight room earlier. And knowing that as a coach and seeing people do that, and then seeing my own kids not live in the weight room, and you're like, hey, should probably head in for those morning lifts. Hey, you should probably get into that afternoon weight lift program if you're not in a fall sport. Hey, you should probably do this, and them not really taking to it. That was really tough for me to be like, no, you're gonna do it, or you know what? Let this be their goal. Let this be their dream. I'm doing what I can by making the suggestions, but I'm not going to sit there and drive you there and force you to do it. I wanted to keep the love there and the passion. And if I felt if I started dictating how things were going to be, that it was going to kill some of that passion for them. And Beth, my former wife, and Blake and Tyler's mom, she was kind of my sounding board where I would complain a lot to her, right? Not to the boys. And Molly now, both with the older boys and the younger boys, they do a lot of therapy for me. And they're like, hey, you just got to let them, it's their journey. You're doing what you can. You got to let them be there. So I was actually pretty proud of, I think, how we probably handled the boys with that. While I also think there were a lot of opportunities missed for them in being able to even be more ready for that next level.
I think you did the right thing. The passion that they have is, and we both know, is the number one thing. So parents, if we're constantly badgering them, it's going to steal some of that passion. I had a guest on, Billy Jones, who talked about his two sons played professional baseball. You know, one had a certain approach to it, kind of the perfectionist approach. The other one had the, like, I'm just out here to have fun approach. And he, spoke to both of those sons differently. And I think we have to understand, we have to vibe with however they are, right? Yeah. Will, my son, was a weight room junkie, but probably didn't do some of the other things that Blake did or Tyler has done. They have to find their personality and what they love about it, and then dive into those things. And if we try to steer them down a different path, to your point, however hard that is to bite our tongues, and you can spell out, if you have the goals and they have their goals written down, and you, with your son or daughter, spell out the process being 3 days a week to the gym, the process being 8 hours of sleep at night, whatever it might be. And then that's how they hold themselves accountable to that. That takes the pressure off of us. Listen, this is the process.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to other professional players or other Division I college players and ask them what their process was, and they said, I do these things. These are my non-negotiables. Going to the weight room, A, B, and C. Awesome. Then the son or daughter has the ownership of that and has learned the process.
I think in that too, I think it's interesting, and I'm just kind of thinking about this as you said it, but they're passionate. They love the sport. They're passionate about it. They're going to be junkies at something different. Will was the weight room junkie. Blake and Tyler were rep junkies. They wanted as many reps as possible. I will hit 1,000 balls off the tee, and I'm never going to get tired of it. That's right. And if they're passionate about it and they're a junkie at some aspect of it, that's a good thing. Like key off of that maybe, and then make sure they're doing these other things, but it may not be a focus area for them. And I think I probably didn't understand that until you saying that right now.
Well, I didn't fully process it until this other guest, Billy Jones, talked about it, and I was like, yeah, I think we have like this kind of cookie cutter formula in our head about
Right.
what should and shouldn't be doing. And he really stated it really clearly, like my formula in my head does not transfer to my son or daughter. They're different. They're individuals. They're passionate about certain things. So I thought that was clear as a bell. Um, Love it. Anything else? We're going to kind of wrap it up, Jay. Anything else that you would, coming into this podcast, wanted to share with parents? Anything else going through this whole process that you can share? 2.0 version, anything you can share?
You know, I love what you're doing, Trav, because this is the stuff that if I had this my first time through, I may have done things a little bit differently. Now, again, if I'm results oriented, both boys wanted to play Division One baseball, and both boys are playing Division One baseball. And then so I sit there and look at the younger two, and they're like, "No, I don't want to go hit today." I'm like, "All right, sounds good." And I'm like, "Well, and Blake would be." He came home, and I was like, "George, you want to go to the park and hit?" And George is like, "No." And I go, "Okay." And Blake goes, "What? Did you just say okay?" You're like, "You absolutely wouldn't have let that happen." And then I look and I'm like, I wouldn't have let that happen. Like that's his perspective of how it was. And when I was just trying to provide an opportunity, but I don't think Blake or Tyler really ever said no. And maybe because they felt like they couldn't say no to go up to the park.
Yeah.
But like my second time through, and maybe my boys don't want to play collegiate level sports. George is convinced that he's going to be playing Division One baseball. And so I've told him, okay, then you better get out and take a lot more cuts, and you better get out and throw a lot more balls and learn more about it and things like that, if that's what you really want to do. But I am so much more laid back on the results side of things, and it makes my life so much more enjoyable watching the boys. It is so great just saying, are they enjoying it? Are they working on the things that we've worked on? That was a really good decision. Too bad a kid intercepted that pass and scored a goal against your team. But man, I really liked your decision there. It just didn't work out for you. Like, I wasn't nearly as laid back the first time through.
Right.
And man, I just don't care about the wins and losses.
Yeah.
It's all about the process.
And it sounds like not laid back in the thing, like you don't care, or you don't want them to have success, or you don't want them to be the best that they can be in whatever they choose to be, right? It's not like you're stepping back from that. It's just the outcome orientation. To your point, am I right? Like the
Yeah.
win loss is just it.
I'm trying to feed their passion on the process side of it.
Love it.
So I'm trying to keep them excited and not have the extreme ups and extreme downs because of the results. I'm trying to keep them super passionate because of the process that and the approach that they took.
Right.
That's my biggest takeaway from version 1.0 to 2.0 is to really focus in on that and keep them positive and keep them passionate.
Love it. And what we understand, right? It just clicked into my head. Those 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old games, as you said earlier, just aren't that important. What's important about it is they do have passion for it. They love showing up to the field. They love their teammates. All those other things. What you begin to understand once you've done it once already, and now our kids are in college, is like, man, why was I beating myself up at that 13-year-old baseball game? Man,
Yeah.
why was I so hard on my team or on my kid or whatever? Man, I want them. The journey is so long. It's long, and we can think now from that journey, what did our kids take out of it? The good stuff, the bad stuff, but it's all pieced together as one. It's not one tournament, one game, one way.
And I'll give you an example of that, not to belabor it, but George's 10-year-old team, they went to travel ball this year for our 10-year-old. So they're playing on the top. He's playing on the top community team for travel ball. And this was our first year doing it. Other associations have been doing it for a year, maybe 2 years more. We get into those first games and teams are just whooping us. 18-1, 22-0, whatever it might be. And to see the growth, the coaches were great. I didn't coach them this year. Coaches were great in very, very much about the process. This team gelled better than probably any team I've seen. Like, so much support for each other. So excited when someone would get a hit or do something fun, even if they laced the ball and got an out. And then all of a sudden you saw in the middle of the year, I mean, we might have started off, again, I don't know records, but might have started off 2-10, right, in the first part of the year. And then in the middle of the year, we play the same team that beat us 18-2, and we lose by 1 run in the bottom of the 6th inning. And then we play them in the state tournament, and we tied them. And it was so cool because it wasn't about the wins and the ties and the barely losing. It was about, look at the baseball that these kids are playing. Look at how now they pop off the bag ready for the next play rather than celebrate getting the first, the out at first while the kid's just rounding the bases because we think the play's done, right? But it's the growth and seeing they're learning the process. And if you were to look at the two halves of the season, we were well over 500 in the second half of the season compared to the first. But it was just because they stuck to the plan, which is, let's just build these kids and teach them how to play competitive ball. And everyone stayed positive and supported each other. So it was really cool to see.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thanks so much, Jay. Just some amazing nuggets, and I think the parents out there will get a lot out of the ups and downs that you and I have had and the journey that we've been on. So thanks again. Really appreciate you being a part of this.
Love being here. Thanks, Trav.
Yep. Give me 1 second while this thing uploads. Stay on here 1 second, Jay.
All right.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to like, follow, and especially share the podcast. We're trying to spread the word. If you want more information on techniques, tools, strategies that you can use to help your son or daughter, please check out my book, Parenting Athletic Kids. It's available on Amazon. Thanks again, and we'll be back with another podcast really soon.